So again, we've got Mark here. He's come along to have more of a conversation this time, where we're going to be talking about the folklore and the cryptids and the connection, or possibly get to a connection of what these things are.
Yeah.
We're going to draw a conclusion to the folklore stories that we hear and cryptid stories that we hear. That I believe there is a connection there.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
So on that note, what are your thoughts? Where should we start?
I suppose start at the beginning. I mean, most people don't associate me necessarily with cryptids. I've done work with the Arthurian legends, so that's folklore. UFOs, did the book with the UFO crash in it, things like that. Archaeology, obviously, that's the big one.
Well, that's what I thought I'd give you a bit of a...
most people
get your brain working overtime.
It kind of begins years ago. I mean, the thing that really got my attention, and everybody in the British Isles will probably agree with me that's in our particular field of interest, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And there was that amazing book with the crystal skull on the front with this exploding light, and it's full of everything. The thing that got me with Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and a lot of the other books that are very similar to that, was even back then, because I think we're talking material from the 1970s, early 80s, even back then there was some crossover of material. So you'd have UFOs, Loch Ness Monster, witchcraft, spoon bending, Uri Geller, everything, and there'd be all these chapters in the same book. So that was fantastic, and that got my interest when I was a teenager. I can remember it as a 14th birthday thing. I said to my mum and dad, I said, Loch Ness Monster, I want to go and have a look. Let's go up there, let's go Nessie hunting, let's go and do that. Which is now, of course, that's cryptozoology, that's what that is. So way back, it would be, when would that be? 1970s.
Well, I possibly could tell you, because I have got that book knocking around somewhere.
Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
As you can see.
Hey, look at this. Look at this. Short of nothing he's not got. That's amazing. Yeah, we were just saying we didn't have any props, but there it is, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. TV show as well. Of course, anybody that got the book then decided they were going to sort of follow the TV show. I just went past it then. Of course, you've got famous Nessie. I hope we don't... Sorry about this, copyright and all that. I just, what is it? Simon... I knew Simon Welfare and John Fairley. I knew I'd need my glasses at some point.
So what year is that book?
Well, the book itself, this is where it gets quite important, because this really, I suppose, is my initiation into. It's actually, do you remember I said it was either side of 1980? It's 1980.
Oh, brilliant.
So I got it bang on. That's not bad memory, dearie me. It's not bad memory at all. So 1980. Arthur C. Clarke. So, that's the beginning, really, for me. And going off Nessie hunting, of course, at 14, with your mum and dad and all that, and a tent. I hated camping in tents, but we went up there, and, Loch Ness, you see it on TV and you think, well, it's like a big pond, which it does. Wherever you are, you can always see the opposite bank. It's massive. When you actually get there and realise you have no idea how big Loch Ness is, it's huge. Absolutely enormous. You can't see the end of it lengthwise. It disappears off into the distance. So I think we started at Inverness, and then we kind of did a tour of the loch, and I found the gates to Boleskine House, which is where Crowley had his house up there, which they're doing up. Fantastic. That's been restored at the moment. And we spent about 2 weeks up there, and I saw absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. But it was my introduction to the fact that at certain times of year, Scotland gets swarmed with black fly. So that was, we encountered the black flies up there that year. So I've got sort of fond memories and then difficult memories. But this is a period in my life when I'm very much into your ghosts and your spirits, your UFOs. I'm researching witchcraft at this point. It leads into the origins of me having interest in Arthur and all the other things I've got interest in, which have stayed with me. But that, in a sense, is the reason why I've got an interest in cryptozoology. because I went Nessie hunting, which leads to an interesting question. And I'm not quite sure where this will take us, but very, very recently somebody said, okay, ghosts. Why don't dinosaurs have ghosts? Because at the end of the day, they've died like everything else. They've disappeared. We've got evidence of their existence. Well, we see ghosts for us. There's loads of ghosts of us knocking around. There's phantom things as well, like phantom coaches and phantom dogs and phantom signs in the sky and all this kind of things. What about dinosaurs? And kind of the direction it's gone in recently, which I find very interesting, is the idea that, well, actually, maybe there are ghosts of dinosaurs. And it does explain some of the mysteries, some of the things that previously have been. For example, Australopithecus is a fossilized, giant, ape-like humanoid creature. And fairly recently I saw a American reconstruction of this thing. And they'd done it with shaggy red hair. And when I first looked at the photograph, I thought, oh, it's Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It wasn't Bigfoot. It was a statue of Australopithecus. And then I thought, ghost. Bigfoot, whatever they are, we're not at this point at liberty to actually grab hold of one and go, hey, look, I've got a Bigfoot. There it is. There's clearly something else going on there. And then you've got, fairly recently online, there was some enhanced phone footage, and you could see this Bigfoot moving along the edge of this river in America, and it gets to the middle of the frame, and then it kind of goes, and it's gone. And you're like, did I just see that thing dematerialise? What on earth's going on? And that's quite common, because with the trackers who are tracking the Bigfoot tracks, very often these tracks will go for miles and miles and miles, and then they'll just fizzle out in the middle of nowhere. And they fizzle out in places where they can't fizzle out. So like on the banks of a river, on a sandy beach, you can't just vanish. You can't have tracks disappearing and not have the exit route visible in the mud or in the sand or whatever. But they do. They just vanish. Skinwalker Ranch as well. Another series where they've got sightings of cryptozoological creatures, things like dogman and what have you. There are claims that they've been seen appearing and disappearing. It's almost like they come in through a portal and then disappear out through a portal, which again is pushing all of these issues together, because now what we're debating, what we're talking here, is you've got a physical cryptoid of some kind that clearly isn't just physical. There's something else going on here. Is it interdimensional, which is bringing in elements of ufology and where things are coming from ufology? And then what about ghosts? What about the whole ghost hunting scenario and phantom things, So the general view, certainly at the beginning of this year, around conferences and speakers and things that are being produced and written, is that these things somehow are linked. It's this interdimensional, multidimensional idea that maybe somehow these things are coming into our dimension and then exiting our dimension, which is a very neat solution, because not only does that deal with the invisibility and the sort of ephemeral nature of these things and the reason why we can't always grab hold of them, but then it also deals with the physical side, that they are clearly turning up. I can think of one example of there were some ranchers in the States, again, lakeside cabin, and they got accosted by a very large Bigfoot on the outside of the building, and it's rattling things and it's banging things and it's attacking the door and that. When they got up the following day and went out, they discovered whatever it was had actually walked across some screws that were sticking out of a piece of wood, and it left hair, it left skin, it left blood, vis-a-vis they had some DNA. Now the conclusion of that in the program I saw was that the DNA, they discovered it wasn't human, it was something else, and that's where the program ended.
Right.
Don't you hate it when they do that? I hate it when they leave it with a cliffhanger. There's going to be more tests to follow, and you're like, no, just tell me, just give me the evidence, present it. So it would appear that these things can leave physical traces. I mean, Bigfoot hair is fairly well known to being left behind and what have you. Although, it's weird, nobody's found any evidence of Bigfoot births or poop or dead Bigfoot, or a lot of the bits of normal, average, everyday life don't seem to be there. They're missing. They found evidence of disturbance, but not of feeding. Not as far as I can remember. Could be wrong. Somebody can message you. Chance for interaction. If anybody knows differently, let us know, sort of thing. But that's kind of where we're at in the 21st century. That's where we are now. That's what we're looking at now. We've got this situation where, if it's a little green man and he comes out of a bright light, or if he's a 12-foot tall ape and he comes out of a bright light, or if he's a dog man and he comes out of a bright light, or you're starting to see, ghosts materializing out of the light. You've got something going on here in frequencies. I'm sure Tesla would just sit there and go, you know what? I know exactly what it is. It's this particular frequency, That's that's where we're at in the 21st century. But then the other side of this is folklore. We're also looking at folklore. So you got this, little green man with a big head with, bulging eyes and all that, and he's just arrived and he comes out of, a shining dome-shaped spaceship or whatever. What about little green men that come out of non-shining dome-shaped burial mounds? So now you're into the realms of little green elves, pixies, fairies. You can see where this is going, can't you? The green children of Woolpit. This boy and girl that, we live in another place where there's no sunlight and it's green. Our village is through a tunnel underground and it's elsewhere, and, we've just appeared.
If there's anyone out there who doesn't know that story...
I was just about to go there, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, don't worry. I was going to say it's medieval. It's, I think it's 13th century. They had the village of Woolpit. They had these two kids that were found in a pit, a hole out in the woods. And they couldn't speak any language that anyone could understand. But the distinctive thing was they were green from head to foot. From my point of view, archaeologically, if they'd been scrubbing around in a copper mine for long enough, they could have turned green. There's no problem with people being stained green. It happens. So that's easy enough to explain. But where they said they came from and the language they spoke, the boy became sick and died because he couldn't deal with the food and the bacteria and what have you in our realm, so to speak. But the girl learned the language and carried on, and that's how they got the story. The Green Children of Woolpit story comes from the girl. And it was written down at the time. So it's not a case of us back engineering folklore to come up with this. There is an actual account of the Green Children of Woolpit from the time.
Anyone who Googles that, they'll see all the information on it.
Yeah, they'll find it. It's out there. And it's valid, So sticking with the theme, it's like, well, where does that come from? What are we dealing with here? There's fairies are beings of light. That's what people tend to describe them as. Leprechauns. There's a word you don't hear every day. They're little green men, aren't they? They're the Irish version of these little creatures. They're everywhere, all over the place in folklore. And the overlaps, some of the overlaps that we're seeing nowadays, notionally, those overlaps exist back in the past as well. Because some things come perilously close to others. What I'm thinking of, the mowing devil. You might have seen it where there's a little devil and he's mowing a corn circle. And he mows a corn circle. So everyone's gone, hey, that's the first crop circle. Okay, well, yeah, the circle's a circle. But what about the little devil guy? What about this little, is he a little green man? Is he an elf or a demon, or is he just another interdimensional being? The point of that, the engraving in particular, is that he's made a circle. He's mowed a circle into somebody's corn. Now, you're talking with the mowing devil, I think the engraving's 17th century. It's from the 1600s. So it's a very, very long time ago. But it depends what set of eyes you use to look at that, because you can go, right, historically it just means that could be the first crop circle. You could look at that and go, well, crop circles are associated with aliens, with UFOs. Or you go down another route and go, well, hang on a minute, it's a devil. Is it a spiritual thing? Did they think it was a demon? Or even further, you could say cryptozoologically, folklore-wise, fairy, elf, what is it? What are we looking at here? So just in that one little picture, that one little engraving, it starts to raise issues as to what we're seeing. Scientifically, you could look at it and say, well, is that just their way of rationalizing some kind of vortex that has created the circles? I did quite a bit on crop circles because I did the thing for Ancient Aliens. Season 19, episode 2, for anybody who wants to go and watch it. It's out there somewhere. I think it's up to season 21 now, but season 19, we dealt with crop circles. And there's no doubt with crop circles that you've got the same thing going on as with a lot of the mysteries, because it's worth putting this in, it's worth bearing it in mind. What you tend to do is you tend to get the genuine thing. You get the real thing.
Yeah.
So when we did the thing on crop circles, I said, well, there's some early 1990s, 1991, there's some video footage of a ball whizzing round a field, and halfway through this thing whizzing round, you'll see the pattern drop below it. I believe there's actually 2 or possibly 3 bits of this footage that's been filmed by people actually who are out there looking for UFOs, and they've got the cameras and they see the light, so they focus on the light, and next thing it's dropping
I've seen that
crop circle.
Myself, yeah.
Well, we managed to get one of those pieces of footage into the programme. But then when you see something like that happen, it's kind of, you think we're into something again that's kind of interdimensional. You're looking at that, and that's perhaps what we're seeing there is the real deal. But then, like everything else, human beings want to do more. They want more than, and you end up then with a string of copies. You end up with, Bob and Tom with a plank and a rope, and off they go. And you finish up with dozens of these things. Now, fortunately, with seriologists, they can tell the difference. You know what's real and what isn't. If it's not real, you get snap stalks, you get footprints, tracks, you get scratches on them, the stalks. They don't lie in the same way. With the real thing, the stalk itself has actually bent. It's bent at the knuckle. And they lie down in certain ways, and they can form patterns that humans can't. So you have got the real thing in fakes. And that's true with everything. It's like, the famous, I showed it in that book actually, the famous Loch Ness Monster, here he comes, is actually only about that big, and it's stuck on the front of a radio controlled submarine, because the guy that did it eventually came clean. Is it called the surgeon's photo? I think I'm right in saying it is. And he was just, here we go, and it comes, click. Nobody's got any idea what the scale is. But there are real photos all over the world of, different serpents and different creatures coming up. And footage as well. There's some incredible footage now out there of things going through, watery places, and they're clearly not things that we know. So you're into your cryptoids again. But you've got to bear in mind, it's a lesson in point that there are the real things and then there are fakes. Because, you can make money off the fakes and it keeps the whole thing going, et cetera, et cetera. Not going to name drop any, but there are quite a lot of folks out there that seem to lean that way. But by the same token, there is the real deal. So, saw a brilliant one, day before yesterday. It's a great one. Security camera in this guy's back garden, and the caption on it is Bigfoot caught on, security camera. You see this camera pan across like that. I don't know why I'm putting this in, but it's a great little clip. You see it pan across his back garden like that. And when you look very carefully on the left-hand side of the shot here, he's got a jacuzzi, and there's a Bigfoot, and he's in the jacuzzi with a glass of wine like this, as if nobody's looking at him. And clearly it's a fake, but the point I'm making is that the Bigfoot looks real. It looks like a Bigfoot. He's got the beardy bit and all the hair and everything. It's like somebody out there then is obviously making Bigfoot costumes, because this guy's only up to his waist, sat in the jacuzzi. And it's not a Bigfoot. So then you think, okay, well, when you get these blurry shots, and there's They're 100 yards away, so you've got to blow it up so it goes grainy, and then you can just see this shape moving. And you've got the biggest bugbear with those is that you've got nothing for scale. You have no idea how big the figures are. They could be 3 foot tall for all we know. They're just coming through the undergrowth. So you've just got to be aware of that when you start going into folklore and what have you. Let me just grab one of these.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. They do zoom in, and you can't. There's no way you can tell how big the tree is next to it.
No, there's nothing in there for scale.
Yeah.
It'd be absolutely amazing if somebody. This is a real challenge. If somebody produced one of these big American pickup trucks or whatever with one of these Bigfoots stood next to it, because then you just go, yeah, I know exactly how big that is. I suppose the upshot of all of this is that it then feeds into popular culture, which is where the demand for more than actually happens. It's where that comes in. It's where people start to, fake stuff and make more of it. But the real stuff is fantastic. The real stuff is fascinating. And once something actually happens, it does feed into popular culture. And it starts to affect things. That, I suppose, is the definition of folklore. It's when the general population get hold of something and it then becomes almost habitual. Now, what happens nowadays is you'll have things like, Dogman's a good example. You had that amazing British film called Dog Soldiers. Now, the werewolves, quote unquote, in that are dogmen. There's no doubt about it. When you look at them, that's what they are. But that's a great example of something getting to the point where all of a sudden it becomes so popular they make a movie about it. But folklore is interesting because it historically it plays with the perception of reality. I'll give you a few examples. Like, I used to know a gypsy years ago, and she'd never put shoes on a table. Now, I still won't put shoes on a table. I don't know why. She said, we don't do that because it's bad luck. Don't put shoes on the table, it's bad luck.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. That exactly with me. My mum used to say all the time, it's bad luck to put shoes on the table.
Yeah.
And I don't do it now.
Yeah, but where the hell does that come from? I know there's a sensible answer to that, because in the past, obviously, they didn't understand things to do with bacteria and what you can pick up, dirt and what have you. And you wouldn't want that going on the same surface as you were eating off. So there's a kind of intelligence, common sense tells you there's that kind of reason. But bad luck, bad luck.
Yeah.
Where's that? And other folklore things like fairly recently, I bought a little tiny set of miniature clogs. Now these are proper clogs. They've obviously been made as deliberately for a doll of some kind, but they're wooden, they're leather, they fasten, they've got buckles on them, they're proper clogs. And the reason I bought them is I have a real fire, and part way up my fireplace there's a niche inside, and in the old days they used to put a witch bottle or a set of shoes into the hearth to increase the prosperity of the property. But why? And most of these shoes are children's shoes as well. As an archaeologist, we run across this all the time. You run across objects in weird places. You've got nails, you've got cats turning up under floorboards, you've got bottles all over the place, all different kinds, not just the witch bottles, not the stone ones, but glass ones as well. They turn up in places where they shouldn't be. Witch marks are everywhere, shoes, not always pairs, sometimes individual. And things under floorboards. You'd be thinking nowadays, in terms of, well, why didn't they just write something down? Like a spell, quote unquote. Why don't they just make it, most of the time it's objects. The objects, therefore, fall under the category of folklore. What are they trying to do? Which bit of their reality, which bit of their magical existence are they trying to change? What is the push and pull that's going on here? And you find a lot of that in folklore.
You get it with the horseshoe as well.
I was just going to say, to ground it, I was going to go slightly similar but different. Horseshoes are a good case in point, because the only time you can hang them upside down is in a blacksmith shop, because they don't want the horseshoes to collect anything because they're making them and they want it to be sort of upside down. If you're using it for good luck, you're supposed to put it the other way so it catches the luck. But you would never do that in a blacksmith shop. So it's a real that's a real complex piece of folklore. But what a blacksmith would do is he would go down to the beach and pick up a hagstone, as a lot of people do, because then you've got this stone. It can be anything, but it's usually flint that has a hole going through it. And the more of these things you have, and you hang them around all over the place, and it stops evil spirits and sprites and fairies and elves and, you know, anything that's coming to cause trouble. They get fascinated by the holes in the stone, and it stops them. They have to, you know, they get obsessed by the fact that it's got holes in. So if you make a hoop of these things, you know, you make like a whole ring of them and just hang them in your window, theoretically you're never going to get any evil coming in. I have no idea where that comes from, you know what I mean? It's like the old vampire thing, isn't it, where you scatter seeds all around, or rice or whatever, and the vampire has to pick all of them up. Must be like OCD, you know, for cryptids. And he has to pick them all up before he can progress any further, you know. It's that kind of principle. But then you look at things like that now, and you're still on the same subject. You're still in cryptozoology, because you're doing something that has an effect on something that is a being of some kind. But you've drifted into folklore, because we can't always make sense out of what these things are. You know, the whole thing to do with left and right, left-handed or right-handed, and, you know, things like that. That's all folklore, because there's no logical reason for any of the things that are going on. But you're also floating now into magic. You're floating into the whole interdimensional thing, and wavelengths and frequencies and pushing and pulling of reality. I think in the past people tended to separate them into different subjects, because that's the old-fashioned way of doing something bite-sized. So again, back to where we came in with Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, all the chapter headings give you a particular slant. But now, in the 21st century, in reality, all these things are interlinked. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever that they're all interlinked. And it grows. Prehistory seems to have given us a different view of folklore and wavelengths and things like that. Copper. I mean, you know, you could write a book. People have written books on the folklore associated with copper. You know, the metal of the sun and what it can do, and, you know, all these powers it has. But the same thing's true of silver. Same thing's true of gold. Coins, you know, I mentioned coins. They turn up in archaeological contexts. The first machine-made copper pennies, they're really big, heavy copper coins. I think nearly all of them are dated, I think it's 1894 or 1896, because they just did them all in the same year. They invented the industrial pressing process, and they pressed out these massive coins. And the first thing that most people did with them was start putting them in buildings. If you had a building that was going in the 1890s, you know, you'd stick one of these big coins under the doorstep, under the hearth, or under a windowsill, or whatever. So you get these big copper coins turning up everywhere.
Is that to bring wealth to the building?
It's got to be to do with wealth and prosperity. Yeah. You know, it has to. Because it's just anything associated with the hearth, it's the centre of the house. So that usually it's prosperity, whatever. Normally, if it's windows and doors, it's protection. But as much as you can put things to repel things, you could also put things to attract if you're trying to pull something in.
Yeah.
Because wealth, let's face it, most of the wealth in a property comes in and out through the doors.
Yeah.
So it's perfect.
And again with the horseshoe and what it's made from.
Iron.
That's a repellent as well.
It repels fairies. It gets rid of fairies. Which is back to the blacksmith again. The reason they hang them upside down is so that fairies, goblins, sprites, spirits don't sit in them in the ironworking shop.
Yeah.
Because that's not good. They don't want anything in there at all affecting the use of iron. Whereas we nail them to doors, because then, you know, along comes your sprite or whatever. Oh, it's a horseshoe. I'll sit in that. Stops them going any further. But also there's this idea that it collects, you know, somehow it collects luck, good luck. Which I suppose, again, that's leprechauns. Look at the Irish, isn't it? You go in that way. It's that kind of prosperity magic. You know, it's heading in that direction. So there's this, I mean, you know, in the last 30 or 40 minutes, we've ploughed the depths of so many subjects. They're so diverse. And yet we've not left the same subject, if you understand what I mean. It's the different aspects of the same things. So that kind of leaves us in a position where I would think, if you're looking at this from a magical perspective, the person who is there experiencing whatever it is an important part of that process. Because there wouldn't be a process. You wouldn't have reports of UFOs and cryptids and all this Loch Ness Monster. None of this would happen unless there was somebody there to see it. So I wouldn't have any problem if that floated into the area of magic, because that's what we are. You know, we're not a body wandering through the planet. We're a spirit living in a body wandering through a planet, and the planet itself is spiritual. You know, as well as a lot of other things, electrical, whatever. So our presence, being where we are, does affect what happens around us. So we're moving on a bit. We're sort of, I suppose the next question is why? Why do we have all these things happening? Why do these things happen? You know, classic example, you know, you get like 10 people in a 500-year-old building and they're out there to find ghosts. You know, they're looking for ghosts, and sooner or later at some point something's going to happen, because somebody in that group clearly has the ability to disturb whatever is in there and create something, and it happens. But then I suppose you could also detach it and you could say, well, what's going on there? Are the spirits that are already there putting on a performance for a ready, receptive audience? So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's down to the individuals. It's somehow it's a relationship between the two. And that's an important thing to bear in mind, because that is true of every single thing. There's always the thing that's happening and the person that's experiencing it. And there has to be both. 9 times out of 10, it's even like, you know, some guy in a stealth bomber who's chasing a UFO. There's still the person in the bomber and there's still the thing that's out there that's flying in front of him. It's still all the time the experience and the experiencer. It's always the two. Which kind of, I wish Tesla was still around. I love that guy. He really knew his onions, you know what I mean? Like I said, he would just go, well, that's because of the frequencies, you know. We need to have that interaction, that relationship. I'm excited to see where we go. You know, where is this taking us? Because I'm not the only person to sit here, you know, after like a lifetime of strangeness, high strangeness, you know, a whole lifetime of it. I'm not the only person to be thinking that all these things are interrelated, you know, they're connected.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And when you're just putting things in my mind now about, you know, are we living in a construct? Are we living in a virtual reality? Computer program almost. And, you know, it's all these things that are out there, they'll be part of this computer program, because you get a lot of people who see these things, cryptids especially, and sometimes they'll see it slightly different than what the other person has seen it at the same time they're having that experience.
That's absolutely valid. That's, in fact, that can be used as proof, because people will say, well, why didn't everybody see the same thing? Well, actually, the answer is, in reality, people don't see the same thing. So if there are differences in accounts, differences in what people are seeing, I'd be more inclined to say that's real. Because if everybody sat down in the pub and rehearsed the same script, they're all going to see the same thing, and it's all going to come back the same, isn't it? So that's wrong. That's clearly not how reality works. So the differences, to some extent, are more important than the similarities. Yes, they're seeing the same thing, but from different viewpoints. You learn that with history. The more you look at history, when you look at the different accounts of the same thing, there's always differences if it's real. If it's a script and it's rehearsed, it's all the same. You know, you can clearly see it's a fake. I think as we move forward, I think, you know, as we go forward and things start to combine, I'm not sure we're looking at, when you say computer model matrix, you tend to think of fake and genuine. I think reality is real and it really exists. So in that sense, it's not like a huge computer program. You can't just jump in and jump out and switch it on, switch it off.
I see it more when I was thinking that. I see it more as, it is. It's real. We're here. We've got our avatars, what we're in, but we're on the outside looking in.
It's how many layers of reality are there? So if this is real, does that mean that some of the other things are also real? So you stood there in a field and a portal opens and out steps a cryptid. Well, through that portal is something else that's real. What I'm into now, I'm into this whole idea that you can have different levels of existence in different places, but all at the same time. So everything's interrelated. I'm just trying to think of the term that they use for it now. It's on a molecular level. So something can happen in one place and the same identical thing happens somewhere else. You've got places like CERN are looking into it on a molecular level, the way that the universe operates. They're coming up with the same conclusions, actually, that we're discussing now. They've got an idea that we live in a multiverse. We live in multiple realities all happening at once.
But when you look at the realities, is it all in the same place and it's what we perceive with our eyes as well? And these are the other dimensions.
Well, I've touched on that because alarmingly, we only see about 3%. Was it 0.3% of all wavelengths and frequencies? It's a very tiny, tiny little. Our perception band is very, very small. And as science has looked more and more on what's out there, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, the thing we're living in is bigger. And as they've gone out into the universe around us and gone the opposite way as well, they've gone down smaller and smaller and smaller, down to an atomic and subatomic level, they've realised that old magical saying, as above, so below, it's absolutely 100% correct. Because the further down you go, the more it's starting to look like the further out you go. So the bigger and the smaller you go. And we're only in a tiny, tiny little bit of it.
Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking hologram as you were saying that.
Well, holograms are interesting. I mean, what we tend to do as human beings, we tend to borrow from nature. And the obvious question that's been with us ever since we discovered the hologram is, well, where's the hologram in nature? Where's the natural equivalent of that? Something that is three-dimensional, it clearly appears to be solid, it clearly appears to be there. It's in the frequency of light, but at the same time, it's not there. Even though it is there, it's captured. And the medium that we've captured it in, I think, is glass. We tend to put holograms into glass. So you're into the realms of silica, you're into silicates and crystals and things like that, holographic existence.
Spoke about it past.
Which we've touched. Crystal Skulls and Human Heads, which is the book I've done on that, touches on that. But when you start looking at that, then the obvious question is, well, where is it in nature? Where is that three-dimensional thing happening in nature? Well, we've got Operation Bluebeam and things like that now, where we can now use the atmosphere and put a 3D image into the atmosphere. Well, again, if we can do it, there's got to be a natural equivalent somewhere. So, again, you're into the frequencies. You know, ghosts and, you know, the ghosts of dinosaurs even, maybe that's what the Loch Ness Monster is, you know. Is it a replay of something which is holographic? Where that starts to come unstuck is when whatever it is you're looking at is acting in a conscious way. You know, if it's the ghost of the Grey Lady who died back in, 1740 or whatever, and she always does the same thing, she always walks down the same stairs in the same place at the same time all the time, then that would appear to be a hologram. It's a repeat. But if you're dealing with something that appears in front of you, and it's a Bigfoot, and it decides it's going to walk over and stick its paw print on your windscreen and then vanish into the woods, that's not a repeat, it's a one-off. Well, it's showing consciousness, it's showing interaction with the physical environment. So again, the hologram doesn't quite do that justice. That's something beyond that. conscious holograms. Whoa, we fell off the edge of Star Trek now. You know what I mean? Conscious holograms.
Well, that's where I'm.
Yeah, that's where we're going, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where we're going. Where does that take us? Wow. I personally, on a personal level, think that the entire planet is conscious. I think we're just a tiny part of an enormous conscious web. You know, I think the planet and everything that happens here and what we see and what we experience is, you know, we're literally a tiny blade of grass in a huge field, you know, drop in the ocean. And the amount of time we're on planet Earth, we don't really get enough time to get to grips with what's going on here. We don't have the time to do that. So if everything is so much bigger than us, then there is space for conscious holograms. There is space for, you know, things out there that perhaps we don't have a handle on, you know. We're in the 21st century. We're really pushing the boundaries. So hopefully somewhere soon something will, you know, come through and give us the answers. But yes, it's linked. You've got your folklore, you've got your cryptids, you've got your different frequencies, you've got your different planes of existence. I'm not sure the Matrix is exactly right. I think they got something in that movie. They captured something with it.
Yeah, I mean, these are words what we can use that people understand when you say things.
But whatever it is, it's going to be bigger than that. You know what I mean? It's going to be massive, absolutely enormous, bigger than that. And now with science going the way it is, all the things we used to think were fixed, to some extent, they're not fixed anymore. You know, we're realising that there's some kind of flow going on. There's an ebb and flow. And I think the whole cryptozoological, you know, folklore, everything, the whole area of the investigation, UFOs, etc., it's pushing the boundaries. You know, somebody in 100 years' time is going to look back on this and go, oh, I've got the answer for that. We've got the answer for that. We know what that is now. Oh, that bit's right and that bit's not right. You know, and they'll know, because we are moving forward. We're definitely advancing, as long as we can survive long enough to get to the end of that rabbit hole.
Right, so I'm going to go back a bit again, back to this dinosaur, you know, ghost idea. Because there's two accounts from Delamere. There's one where a bunch of 6 people were out walking and they came across a saber-toothed tiger. And you can imagine what they did. They ran off.
Yeah, as you would.
And again, the dinosaur. A couple in the 80s, I think it was April 1984, were going through the woods, and they came upon a sleeping dinosaur. Again, they turned away and ran. Reported, these both been reported. And that's where I was thinking, you know, like this ghost idea, were the spirits of these animals that were there in prehistoric times?
Well, I suppose it hangs on the definition of a ghost. Because in reality we don't know what they are. We don't actually know what ghosts are. So if you go down the traditional route, you say, okay, it's the spirit of something that's deceased, that's passed on, then what you're looking at then is something that's there but isn't there. It's kind of tangible but intangible, which in the past is the popular view. It's the spirit of something that's deceased. But what about time slips? That's
another possibility, yeah.
I mean, now we know that time slips have occurred because people have studied. Certainly since the turn of the new millennium, people are studying time and they're studying time slips. And time, for us, it's linear, but maybe it's not. So maybe if you came across a dinosaur that was asleep, maybe what's happened is you've slipped somehow. Your timing's gone. But then you've also got the multiverse thing. Are you looking into another alternative universe or another dimension that's coexistent with your dimension and your universe? So what you're doing is you're looking through a window. And it's just not cut and dried. I mean, Einstein had this thing with time where he said we think of time as being linear, as being a straight line, when in actual fact it's folded. It goes all over the place. And occasionally 2 of those folds might come really, really close to each other or even touch. And then you're looking through a window to another period. It's good that people are now starting to realise that some of these things are Dinosaurs. Because that's where we came in at the beginning. It's me saying, well, why can't Bigfoot be Australopithecus, you know? That's kind of been postulated before, because people have said, well, what happens if Australopithecus didn't go extinct? What happens if the Neanderthals didn't go extinct? What happens if these things are actual physical apes that have survived, you know? From my point of view, I'm not entirely convinced with geological timescale. You know, the idea that we've been here for hundreds of millions of years, you know, it's like, okay, what does that statement mean? You know, your head's just gone, you know, it's hundreds of millions of years. Okay, that's a big number, isn't it? You know, even if you go to like tens of millions of years or tens of thousands of years or just an awful lot of thousands of years, your head just goes, because the time scale is ridiculous. So what happens if there is no time scale? What happens if you just eliminate the time scale? Well, that conveniently, that kind of somehow explains like finding hadrosaur mummies that are still organic. You know, stuff coming out of the permafrost, like, you know, woolly mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses and stuff like that. They're clearly not. They're not 60,000 or 100,000 years old. They're clearly not. You know, I always mention that Triceratops horn that some student archaeologists dug up in America. Nobody told them that it's a fossil, so you can't carbon date it. So they carbon dated it, and it came back at something like 33,000 BC. So there you are in America, Triceratops wandering around, sucking a great big horn at the same time as human beings. Kind of, you know, upset the apple cart. That only happened relatively recently in historical terms. It's only in the last 20 or 30 years that's happened. So then you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, it's the higher up you go, the more the boundaries start to disintegrate, which was what we were talking about earlier on, this idea that somehow the universe doesn't work the way we think it works. You know, quantum physics, that's what it is. It's particle physics. It's looking at the way the physical universe exists in ways that previously we haven't looked at. We haven't been capable of seeing what's going on. And all the nice little pigeonholes and boxes and, you know, yes, we can stand on this, it's rock solid, you know, we can guarantee this is absolutely true, you know. No, forget it. All that now has just gone, it's collapsed, you know. And it's a shame because it's almost like scientifically they're at the period of time now where you know, the witches were persecuted, the witches were, you know, called everything under the sun, they were burnt, they were killed. It was, and then by the time we got into like the 1800s, you know, all of a sudden people started to accept them, and then come forward and they've developed into an accepted genre of people doing things which, you know, actually an awful lot of it is proper, it's herbs, it's true, it's possible, it's a branch of spirituality. The same thing is happening with you cryptids, your folklore, your ghosts, your UFOs. It's happening with science. The scientists who used to say, that's a load of nonsense, you know, it's rubbish, there's no evidence, we can't prove it, you know, they're making it up, in some cases faking it, you know, etc., etc. The science community now has had to take a huge step back and say, well, hang on a minute, we're discovering that there's something in it. We have to now start to accept that these things are not as we originally poo-pooed them, you know. We're thinking now in terms of quantum physics, etc., things that all of a sudden everything we thought was rock solid isn't. It doesn't quite work that way. You know, so many of the scientists of the 20th century and now in the 21st century, they're changing the limits, they're changing the boundaries, they're changing what they're seeing. Well, I think it was CERN fairly recently actually transported a particle from one place to another, particle physics. So if they can do that in their reactor, if they can make something happen one place and then it moves to somewhere else, how does that work in nature? You've got the same questions going through there as you would have with holograms. You know, okay, if we can do it, then why can't nature do it? Where else is it happening? Because we're stealing from nature, basically. Everything we do, every time we discover something, it's already there. We're just discovering it. We're not making something happen that doesn't already happen. And that's shaken the foundations. Back to Arthur C. Clarke again. He'd be turning in his grave now. The program he made and the books he wrote and things he did in the 70s and 80s and 90s, things that happened in the 1990s. We're looking at it with a different set of eyes. It's a different world out there. So I think it's suddenly become a real valid area of scientific investigation. I can remember when I was at school as a kid, nobody really took anything like that seriously. Your whole ghosts, UFOs, and everything else. Nobody. Yeah, it's something that happens, but it doesn't happen to us. It just happens to somebody else. And how's it going to help us? What's that got to contribute to the world around us? Now it's the other way around. Now it's very serious scientific people with an awful lot of money throwing a lot of science at these areas and saying this could transform the entire way we live. This could totally alter humanity forever. It's just a different league. It's a different world altogether. And now actually it's something that people should be looking into and should be getting involved in. Really, really should. I have no doubt. I have absolutely no doubt that people at Skunkworks and other scientific establishments have already been doing this, for quite a considerable amount of time. And what we see now as mysteries and things happening, I think some of it's down to us. Somebody somewhere knows something about it. I guarantee. We're not the only ones to be theorising the way we do. So if anyone knows, please let us know.
Yeah, I was thinking with this, going back to the constructs as well, and Charles Fort, in his book, the Book of the Damned, and his other works, he said that we're here, we're almost like, we're owned, we live in a zoo, and we're actually owned by something that is watching over us.
Yeah, I mean, Fort was way ahead of his time. There you're talking 19th century, you're going way back with Fort. And he was doing back then what some of us are doing today. He was collecting together all these things that really you couldn't explain, back then. Like pterodactyls staggering out of coal measures, still breathing, and all that sort of stuff, All these stories. Well, there's no smoke without fire, and all that we were missing, really. Anything that, as a human race, that we tend to poo-poo is something we don't understand. It's easier to make fun of something if there's no basis for it and no grounding for it. But certainly in the 21st century now, we're starting to realise there's a lot going on. There's a lot more to this planet than we've previously thought,
It definitely is.
Can't wait to see what's coming next. So basically, the takeaway from this, the roundup at the end of the day is, superstition can sometimes become science. So don't poo-poo it.